I've been graciously asked to come back and give a command performance of the Miami Valley, Ohio's original Jersey Shore. A little bit about my background. I received my undergraduate and graduate degrees in history at Miami University, where I studied under President Philip Shriver. I did my master's in Ohio history, wrote a biography of Wallace P. Raudebush, who was responsible for the campus plan. I got my Master of Arts in Teaching, and for the past 32 years have been a history teacher in the Hamilton City Schools. I actually began my teaching career as Jim Blunt's student teacher, and so I was introduced to a lot of Hamilton history at that point. And so currently I teach a elective class, History of Hamilton, Ohio, at the Hamilton Freshman Campus, which has become pretty popular and really a lot of fun to teach, because I can explore lots of different areas of Hamilton history. And actually some of this presentation is based on some of the things that I researched and taught in my classroom. Currently, I'm the docent of the McKean-Hirschner Log House in Monument Park. I'm one of the founders of the Sims Park Hollow Earth Festival, which oddly enough comes up in this presentation. I'm chair of the Hamilton Civil Service Commission. I'm on the 17 Strong Board and currently serve on the Butler County Courthouse Restoration Committee, and working on a project currently for a historical marker for Peck's Edition. So, when you think about New Jersey, you probably have lots of ideas. You might think of the one-time popular MTV show Jersey Shore with Snooki there in the middle. You might think of Grover Cleveland. Although Buffalo claims him as a native son, he was in fact from New Jersey. Frank Sinatra, President Woodrow Wilson, although a Virginian by birth, was a student, a professor, president, and governor in New Jersey. You might think of the Jersey Boys, Frankie Valli. You might think of John Bon Jovi. You might think of Bruce Springsteen. You might think of The Sopranos. You might think of Jersey Mike's, or you might think of a nice summer vacation at the Jersey Shore. So, how did New Jersey get connected with Southwest Ohio? New Jersey ultimately is going to play a very significant role in the settlement and development of our part of the state in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, mainly as a source of some of the early settlers who went on to become major leaders in government, education, business, and agriculture. So the long and short of it is, how they got here was largely a result of the debt incurred after the American Revolution. So after the American Revolution, the new government of the United States was land rich but cash poor, and as a way of rewarding veterans from the American Revolution, gifts of land warrants were issued to veterans based on their rank and service in the Continental Army. And so many of the people who ended up in Southwest Ohio were veterans from New Jersey who were awarded land grants. And so the Northwest Territory, which includes what's now Ohio, was largely populated by these veterans from the American Revolution. So this incentive really encouraged migration from New Jersey, and soldiers, along with their families, settled these new lands. And so there was kind of a dual purpose here, where the government wanted to both compensate soldiers for their military service, but also populate this new frontier region. Okay, so this land, large area known as the Northwest Territory, was awarded to the United States as a result of the Treaty of Paris. And so to populate that land and secure the frontiers, lots of these settlers came. So the southwestern part of Ohio, especially the area around Cincinnati, Hamilton County, the Miami Valley, attracted a lot of these New Jersey settlers. So the map on the left shows you sort of the big picture of what America looked like at the end of the American Revolution, the early period of the early Republic. So you can see the area outlined there in gold. That's the Northwest Territory. And so that's the land that the United States government is going to parcel out and hopefully sell and populate and ultimately turn into states. So the map on the right shows you Ohio, which really offers an interesting glimpse at these post-Revolutionary War land claims. Ohio is sort of fascinating because different parts of the state, what becomes the state of Ohio, was claimed and settled by different groups from different parts of the original 13 states. So, for example, the area of northeastern Ohio, stretching from roughly Cleveland to Toledo, that was the Western Reserve that was claimed by Connecticut. And so to this day, you see a strong New England influence in many of the towns in northeast Ohio. The area of the Ohio Company Purchase in southeastern Ohio, around Marietta, that was settled by American Revolutionary War veterans from New England. The Virginia Military District in the south central part of the state was claimed by Virginia. In fact, George Washington himself had land claims in the Virginia Military District. So then for our story, our focus is in the southwestern corner of Ohio, in the land between the Little Miami and the Great Miami Rivers. The land purchase, which will become known as the Sims Purchase or the Miami Purchase. And that's the part of the state that's going to be largely settled by people from New Jersey. So really, I think if there was an atom to the story of how New Jersey came to have such an influence on Southwest Ohio, it's got to be New Jersey native Judge John Cleve Sims, who in 1788 purchased a large portion of land in southwestern, Ohio. And so this area known as the Miami Purchase or the Sims Purchase covered much of what's now Butler County, Hamilton County, and Warren counties in Ohio. So Sims was an active recruiter of people from New Jersey and other eastern states that really creates a direct pipeline of New Jerseyans into the area. And so Sims's land company put a real big emphasis on the fertility of the soil, the opportunities available for more space. I mean, New Jersey is a small state, and so the opportunity to purchase a large tract of farmland in what was then the West was very appealing to a lot of people, and Sims did a good job at promoting it. Some people say too good of a job. So Sims's name is very familiar to all of us here in Southwest Ohio, and all the names are a tribute to this man who is really the kind of the first land baron and real estate agent in Southwest Ohio. So we have, for example, in Hamilton, we have Sims Park, we have Sims Road, there's Sims Township, Cleves, Ohio. These are all named for Sims. So Sims was a really interesting character, and you could trace the Sims family all the way back to Canterbury, England in 1599. The earliest Sims came to Massachusetts Bay in the 1630s as part of the Great Migration. Sims himself was born on Long Island, but at the time of the American Revolution, had relocated to Sussex County in northern New Jersey. So during the war, Sims was a soldier. He was actually a colonel in charge of New Jersey troops. He was involved in the drafting of the first state constitution in New Jersey, and for several years was an associate justice on the New Jersey Supreme Court. So, in all sense of the word, he was quite a player in the affairs of New Jersey. So beyond New Jersey, he was in the Continental Congress, and interesting, the time period that he was in the Continental Congress, 1785, 1787, that's when the Congress adopted two very important land ordinances, the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Two real pivotal laws that were passed by the, the Confederation Congress that opens up the way to the settlement of the Northwest Territory. Excuse me. So this slide's interesting because it kind of shows you the development of the township system, which really becomes the blueprint for the settlement of America after 1785. So the land would be parceled out in these nice, neat, geometric sections and townships, and the first survey was actually done in southeastern Ohio, the Seven Ranges, by someone we'll meet later in the talk, Israel Ludlow, who was also from New Jersey. And the part of the slide on the right, or the left, excuse me, shows you the effects of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which set a mechanism of how the territory would ultimately be carved into a series of states. And so you can see, for example, that Ohio became the first state out of the Northwest Territory in 1803. So in New York City, Congress adopted the Northwest Ordinance, and in Philadelphia, work was being completed on the Constitution of the United States. So really, 1787 is a really pivotal year in American history because you have two real important documents, the Land Ordinance and the Constitution, being adopted simultaneously by Congress. So this is where the story gets interesting, because really, if one were to judge John Cleve Sims's actions in modern terms, he had inside information. He had more inside information than practically anybody when it came to, excuse me, the buying and selling of land in the Northwest Territory. So on August 29th, less than 7 weeks after the enactment of the ordinance, Sims asked his colleagues to permit him to buy 1 million acres in the wilderness. And so again, this is the epitome of insider dealing. So joining Sims, I call him the often controversial Sims, were two other people from New Jersey, Elias Boudinot and Jonathan Dayton, past and present members of Congress from New Jersey. In addition, Dayton was also a member, in fact, the youngest member of the Constitutional Convention at the time. So you can see these men definitely had, shall we say, the inside track. So let's talk about Elias Boudinot, because his name is actually familiar on the landscape, especially the west side of Cincinnati, where there is a Boudinot Street. Boudinot was a founding father. He was a lawyer, a statesman, early abolitionist and women's rights leader from Elizabeth, New Jersey. Ironically enough, the same hometown as the founder of My Village in upstate New York. Boudinot had a career as the member of the Continental Congress. He was also the first director of the United States Mint, founder of the American Bible Society, and a trustee of the College of New Jersey, which today we call Princeton University. Boudinot Street in Cincinnati is named after Elias Boudinot. Some of you may know the original La Rosa's restaurant was built, or is still standing actually, on Boudinot Street in the west side of Cincinnati. And Hamilton, Ohio actually has claim to Elias Boudinot as well, because up until the 1880s, what is today Park Avenue in Rossville was originally called Boudinot Street. Then we have Jonathan Dayton, whose name obviously is familiar to all of us. Dayton was also a founding father and a politician from New Jersey. He attended the College of New Jersey and was a classmate of Aaron Burr, our future vice president and killer of Alexander Hamilton, and that anniversary is coming up on Friday, the 11th of July. At 26, Dayton has the claim to fame of being the youngest person to sign the Constitution of the United States. He was elected to the House of Representatives and was the Speaker of the House for 3 years. He also served one term in the U.S. Senate, but then was involved as a co-conspirator in the Aaron Burr conspiracy in 1807. While he was exonerated of all charges, his political career was in tatters, and he never recovered his career. However, Dayton, Ohio is named after Jonathan Dayton. So in the spring and summer of 1787, our friend Judge Sims travels down the Ohio River to look at potential locations. So again, he has a lot of inside information. And so his choice of land, because it was north of the Ohio River between the Little Miami and Great Miami Rivers, becomes known as the Sims Purchase or Miami Purchase. So if you look at the map, you can see that half of Butler County, so all of the county that is east of the Great Miami River, that was part of the original Sims Purchase. Most of Hamilton County and a good portion of Warren counties made up the Sims Purchase. So ultimately over 300,000 acres of prime real estate. Now, to continue the saga of the inside story, inside trading here, by that point, Judge Sims had been appointed as one of the administrative officials, a judge, one of the 3 judges of the Northwest Territory. And so he had that prime political position as he's making his purchase of all this land. So his goal was to become a major land baron in Southwest Ohio. So buy a lot of land, make a profit, sell it to others. So now we run into some difficulties with Sims, and I've tried to analyze Sims's personality, try to get inside of his head. Of course, it's folly. We can't know what he's thinking or doing. But later on, he started pricing land at a certain price, and then he raised the price. And a lot of his deals, let's just say, to put it lightly, he was very sloppy with his record keeping. There was lots of confusion between Sims and the government, for example, in terms of the size of the purchase, the boundaries of the purchase. Lots of the deals were faulty. In a lot of cases, Sims sold land that he didn't own. A lot of these problems were, I think, attributed to Sims's tendency to overlook details. I think he was a good man, but I think he was bad with books. And he sold a lot of land on credit, didn't collect payment. So not a good businessman, really. He might have been a good salesman, but I don't think he was a good businessman. And so another real part of the problem, and this is where sort of the story of Hamilton, Ohio comes in, is that Eastern newspapers were referring to this real estate as the Miami Slaughterhouse because of the large numbers of deaths attributed to Native Americans on settlers. And so obviously that was going to dampen the enthusiasm of a lot of Easterners to come and settle in this, fertile, God-blessed Miami Valley. So Sims had issues with that. So then Sims started having some problems with some of his associates, and then mysteriously in 1811, there was a fire of unknown origin, unknown in quotation marks, that destroyed Sims's house and a lot of the paperwork, very convenient. Eventually, his land holdings were seized and sold to satisfy legal claims against him. So Sims, who at this point was a hearty 72, died in poverty in 1814 in Cincinnati, and ultimately is going to be buried with full military honors in North Bend, Ohio, a community he himself founded in 1789. But at the end of the day, I would like everyone to kind of, a takeaway from this talk is consider John Cleef Sims the founding father of the Miami Valley. And so this is where he's buried in the Congress Green Cemetery. There's his gravestone. There's a historical marker talking about Sims. This is John Cleef Sims Hall, which is on the campus of my alma mater, Miami University, which really kind of owes a lot of its existence to John Cleef Sims. And so this was built in the late 1930s as a residence hall for men on the East Quad of Miami University. So then, sort of to take off a little bit on the North Bend connection in the Sims-Harrison family. So North Bend was the third settlement in the Sims purchase, and originally John Cleef Sims named it Sims City, but ultimately the name never took. I think it's sort of hard to say, actually. And of course, North Bend becomes associated with 3 generations of the Harrison family. So William Henry Harrison married John Cleef Sims' daughter. She's there in the upper left-hand corner, Anna Sims. And so their son, John Scott Harrison down there to the lower left, his son, future President Benjamin Harrison. So there's the famous log cabin campaign of General Harrison of 1840, when in fact Harrison lived in a very large Virginia-style mansion in North Bend. And so the 1840 election was really sort of the beginning of fake news in presidential campaigns. So the Harrison name, of course, also on the campus of Miami University, there is the original Harrison Hall on the left. That's Miami University's original building called Old Main. The middle section was the first building on campus built in 1816. The current Harrison Hall built in 1959. So in the Sims purchase, the first settlement, and again, we're going to talk, about the New Jersey connection here. So the very first settlement in the Sims purchase was made in November of 1788. 26 people, all from New Jersey, led by Major Benjamin Stites of Scotch Plains, New Jersey, traveled down the Ohio River on flatboats from Pittsburgh and established the first settlement ever in Western Ohio, which was named Columbia, located about a mile west of the mouth of the Little Miami River, basically today between Lunken Airport and Alms Park. The settlement didn't really thrive because of frequent flooding, so what becomes the main settlement of the Sims purchase begins in December 1788 when Matthias Denman from Essex County, New Jersey, Colonel Robert Patterson and Colonel Israel Ludlow from Morristown, New Jersey, landed at a spot on the northeast bank of the Ohio River at the mouth of the Licking River. So originally the town was called Los Antiville, whose name literally means the town at the mouth of the Licking River. Became the largest town in the area. In 1790, the governor of the Northwest Territory, General Arthur Sinclair, had moved the capital of the territory from the Northwest Territory from Marietta to Los Antiville. Didn't like the name at all, and so we think at the suggestion of Israel Ludlow, decided to name it Cincinnati, named after the Society of the Cincinnati, a Revolutionary War fraternity. And so there's Cincinnati, about 1800 there in the lower right-hand corner. So again, Sims had problems with settlement due to the fact that Indian attacks were discouraging settlers, but President Washington, who inherits or becomes president, this is one of his biggest headaches. He had a lot of headaches, but dealing with the Indians in the West was a real big problem. And so in 1790, opposite Marietta in southeastern Ohio, Fort Harmar is built, and the idea was to basically scare the Indians. He didn't want to start a war because he knew the country couldn't afford it, but nevertheless, it didn't work. So in 1790, under General Josiah Harmar, an expedition is launched from Fort Washington, and the campaign ends up near what's today Fort Wayne, in failure. So President Washington now has got an even bigger problem because the Indians are aware of what's going on, they're organized, and so he asked Congress to authorize an increase in the army to challenge the Indians again. So St. Clair, who again remembers also the governor of the Northwest Territory, is put in charge of the army. And the whole operation is doomed almost from the beginning, even though President Washington had warned St. Clair about how to deal with Indians. Washington himself had experience fighting Indians in the French and Indian War, and with General Braddock, when General Braddock was killed. St. Clair was really not the right man to lead the army at the time. And of course, he's facing a very veritable opponent in the great Miami chief, Little Turtle. So St. Clair decides that he's going to build a series of forts extending north from Fort Washington and Cincinnati, northward into Indian Territory. And so it's really that strategy that leads to the beginning of our history here in Hamilton with the construction of Fort Hamilton. So there is our friend, the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, and there on the right is a very lovely painting of what they think Fort Hamilton looked like. You can see the great Miami River there in the background. So let's talk about Israel Ludlow. So Israel Ludlow, I think if there is a founder of Hamilton, Ohio, it would certainly be Israel Ludlow. In his short life of less than 40 years, he surveyed more land in the Northwest Territory than pretty much anybody. He was born in Morristown, New Jersey. He was employed by the federal government as a surveyor, and today he's actually credited with being the founder of not one city, but 3 cities in Southwest Ohio. Cincinnati, Dayton, and Hamilton. So the 3 largest cities in our part of the state, all are attributed to the actions of Israel Ludlow. Ludlow was named a colonel of the county militia in 1790. He was also the first county clerk of Hamilton County, and he was the main surveyor for Jonathan Dayton in his land dealings in Southwest Ohio. So Ludlow in 1794 laid out a new town, which ultimately is going to become Hamilton. And you can see originally the town was called Fairfield, but eventually it was named Hamilton after Alexander Hamilton. So there is the Ludlow's original plat of Hamilton, and it's really amazing how utterly symmetrical it is, and it bears a lot of resemblance to, goes back to, this is good because I did this at the presentation back in May. I messed up the slides. All right, so you can see the symmetry of our streets, and so he's going to do similar designs of Dayton and Cincinnati. And if you look at some of the street plans, say for example of Philadelphia that William Penn laid out in the 1680s, very similar. Everything's on a nice symmetrical geometrical grid That's why Hamilton is very easy to get around, unlike cities like Middletown. So Ludlow really is not only the founding father, but really a patron of the new town of Hamilton. He donated the square for all the public buildings. He donated the square for a church. He donated the square for a cemetery. He donated money for the construction of the first courthouse. And I think it's interesting that one historian said by the time of his death, he had surveyed more land in the Ohio country than any other federal surveyor. And so another takeaway from this talk is that if Sims is the founding father of Southwest Ohio, then Colonel Ludlow is the founder of Hamilton, Ohio. And of course, Ludlow's name appears on streets in Cincinnati, Dayton, Hamilton, Ludlow Township, Ludlow Falls, all of them named after Colonel Ludlow. Now we move on to another member of the Sims family. I gave a talk about him this past spring at the Fitton Center for the Celebrating Self lunch. Captain John Cleve Sims Jr., who, despite the junior, was not the son of John Cleve Sims. He was, in fact, the nephew of John Cleve Sims. And Captain Sims is best known as the proponent of the variant of the hollow earth theory, which introduced the concept of the fact that the world is opened at the poles and one could travel inside, and there would be this wonderful world of flora and fauna. He led a very peripatetic life. He was mostly in the military, served a lot out west, was a hero in the War of 1812, especially on the Niagara frontier. He was at the Battle of Lundy's Lane, for example. He eventually made his way back to Hamilton in 1824, and settled in the North End on land that had been given to him by his uncle, and he died in 1829. He's buried today in what's known as 4th Street Park or Sims Park or Ludlow Park, which was the original Hamilton burying ground donated by a fellow New Jerseyan, Israel Ludlow. So that's not the only New Jersey connection to the cemetery because, and there's some of the pictures from Sims Park, the Hollow Earth Festival that we started last year. So we've had 2 Hollow Earth Festivals, which is a quirky little party we have at Sims Park to celebrate Hamilton's visionaries. Last year we recognized Sims. This year we recognized Colonel Ludlow as our visionary. Okay, another burial ground associated with the Sims family, and this was actually pointed out to me back in May at our lecture, was John Cleve Sims Jr.'s brother Celadon Sims and his wife Phoebe are buried along with 18 other members of the Sims family in the Sims burial ground on Nillis Road and Hicks Boulevard, and once was known as Sims Corner. And so the Sims name is also prominent. The Sims family, especially Celadon, is considered the founding father of Fairfield. And one of the Sims houses from the 1850s is still located on Nillis and Pleasant Avenue. It's currently a bank, but once upon a time it was Sims Tavern. But there's some of the gravestones of the Sims family. Now, back to our John Cleve Sims Jr. and Sims Park. There is also 2 other people buried in Sims Park, or Ludlow Park, who are also from New Jersey. Private Paul Bunnell and his wife Mary from Elizabeth, New Jersey. Bunnell served under General Richard Butler, who our county is named after, during the American Revolution. Bunnell also served in the War of 1812. He was at the Battle of Fort Meigs up in northwestern Ohio. Interesting fact, last year, the bodies of Bunnell and his wife Mary were discovered or rediscovered in Sims Park. using ground penetrating radar from the underground detective. It was actually a wonderful Eagle Scout project by a young man named Zach Kramer. And so we located the bodies, and we have a memorial bench and plaque there. Eventually there will be 2 government tombstones. So interesting, this park was donated by someone from New Jersey, and 3 of the people that are buried there are also from New Jersey. Then we turn to Trenton, Ohio, and as the name suggests, it probably has some New Jersey connection, and of course it does. Trenton was founded by Michael Pierce, who was a Revolutionary War veteran from Scotch Plains, where also Matthias Denman was from. So Pierce and several others came from New Jersey, and they founded Trenton. The name Trenton, though, only came later because originally it was called Bloomfield, Ohio, which was named after Governor Joseph Bloomfield from New Jersey. But apparently there was another place in Ohio named Bloomfield, and so the people in Bloomfield decided to rename their town Trenton in honor of Trenton, New Jersey, the capital of their home state. And there is Pierce's gravestone. Pierce was a deacon of Elk Creek Baptist Church for over 40 years, and he died in 1838, and he's buried there in Elk Creek Cemetery. Rossville, Ohio, as we already mentioned, has some connection to this New Jersey story. One of the founders of Rossville was from New Jersey, and that's Jacob Burnett. So people in Cincinnati are probably familiar with the name Burnett. Burnett was born in Newark, New Jersey, son of a doctor. He also graduated from the College of New Jersey, was a lawyer, became one of the early leaders of the Northwest Territory, was instrumental in writing our first state constitution. In fact, he's called the father of the Ohio Constitution. He was on the Ohio Supreme Court and eventually served as one of our Ohio senators in Washington. And Burnett Woods in Cincinnati is named after Burnett. Then we have the Burr-Hamilton duel, which the anniversary of that is coming up on Friday. Obviously, it took place in New Jersey between Aaron Burr, who was a New Jersey native and an alumnus of the College of New Jersey, Princeton, where his father had been the president. He was the 3rd vice president of the United States at the time of the duel, and Alexander Hamilton, of course, had been the first and former Secretary of the Treasury. So dawn at Weehawken, Burr did not waste his shot. So then the Burr conspiracy, which Burr also becomes infamous from, also has a connection to this part of the state and New Jersey. The details of it are still sort of sketchy, but basically the long and short is Burr tried to potentially detach some of the western states and Louisiana Territory from the Union. The conspiracy really kind of was hatched not long after the duel with Burr, or with Hamilton. And interestingly enough, one of his co-conspirators was Jonathan Dayton, his fellow New Jerseyan and founding father and Princeton classmate. And the foremost conspirator was General James Wilkinson, who at the time was the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army, and during the Indian Wars here at Fort Hamilton was one of the chief antagonists of General Anthony Wayne. And of course, we all know that General Wilkinson was a spy in the employ of the Spanish government. Religion and education. So many of the people who came to Southwest Ohio from New Jersey brought a lot of educational values, religious values, cultural values. A lot of them were Presbyterians who established many churches in their communities. The College of New Jersey was actually a Presbyterian university. Many of the people who came from New Jersey were active in promoting education. First and foremost, of course, was the creation of the Miami University in 1809. There's the earliest known photograph of the campus of Miami. And on the right is our first president, the Reverend Dr. Robert Hamilton Bishop, who was a leader of the Presbyterian Church as well as a Presbyterian minister. We also have John Witherspoon Scott, who was the first professor of science at Miami, named, ironically enough, for the Reverend John Witherspoon, who was the Presbyterian president of the College of New Jersey. And the Presbyterians were very active in creating seminaries and churches. Of course, John Witherspoon Scott's famous daughter, Carolyn Scott, known as Carrie, goes on to marry Benjamin Harrison. And this is currently, well, we still call it Ox College. It was the original Oxford Female Institute. This is where Carolyn Scott went to school. That was founded by her father. Presbyterianism also strong in Hamilton. In fact, the first church services at Fort Hamilton were by a Presbyterian preacher. Agricultural practices and knowledge. So as we were talking about at the beginning, what lured a lot of the settlers here from New Jersey was, reports of the fertility of the soil. And so the farmers from New Jersey came out here and were able to adopt and adapt their farming practices to our wonderful soil and our wonderful climate. And so Ohio, quickly on, not long after statehood, is already becoming one of the largest producers of corn and wheat in the entire United States. And a lot of these farmers, of course, had originally come from New Jersey. And there, of course, is a Jersey cow over there. In terms of political influence, as this part of the state grows in population and economic importance, the New Jersey settlers become very influential in local politics and government. A lot of them were involved in establishing legal and political frameworks, especially the transition from territory to statehood, Jacob Burnet being a good case in point. So today, I think, the influence of these people from New Jersey is still seen in a lot of place names, family lineages, institutions like universities and churches, and that the early influx of these people from New Jersey really helped lay a strong foundation that contributed to this region's growth and diversity, the civic mindedness, and so I think really to understand how this part of the state became what it did, you really have to go back to the New Jersey shore. So things to do in New Jersey, number one, leave. Welcome to Ohio.